Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I am someone who believes very strongly that the work of the Consumer Financial Bureau must go forward and should go forward under the direction of Mr. Cordray. I think to block his appointment simply to express displeasure with either the process or the substance of the law is the wrong way entirely. As the chairman pointed out, the Federal Housing Finance Administration was created with virtually the same authority and on a bipartisan basis, supported by most, if not all, of my colleagues on the other side. There was no discussion of preemption of the Constitution, of checks and balances, or anything else. It was trying to deal with a very serious problem, which we are trying to deal with today, and that is protecting consumers throughout this country. That is the one voice, when we think about voices, that is seldom heard loudly enough in Washington, seldom heard certainly in the Council of Bank Regulators. That is one of the great examples of what took place in the decade from 2000 to 2008, or at least those 8 years, in which consumers were being systematically preyed upon. There was no agency, and as Attorney General, I think you were frustrated by your attempts that were preempted by federal banking regulators, that were preempted by federal laws, that were preempted by many things. We want consumers to have a voice. And frankly, the notion that there's this unchecked, unbounded power is simply wrong. All of the rules that the director will enforce are created by Congress. We voted on it. Sometimes we disagreed, but they're all congressional laws. And frankly, if he goes beyond what the law is, the courts will very quickly, as we've demonstrated, and there is a huge number of financial institutions ready to the court today to protect their self-interest and protect the process. And if you're arbitrary and capricious, the rules will be struck down. But if those rules are consistent with the laws we pass through a democratic process to protect consumers, then consumers will receive protection. And so I think that this whole debate has been extended much too long, and as a result, consumers are being and potentially will be harmed. I particularly, because I worked on this issue along with my colleague Senator Brown from Massachusetts, I'm concerned about military personnel. They will not have the benefit of some of the protections that we put in place because there'll be no one sticking up for them. Right now, Holly Petraeus is leading the office, but she can make and does speeches. She can go out and talk to soldiers and sailors, Marines and airmen, but until someone stands up with the ability to enforce the rules for their benefit, they'll still be preyed upon, and they are. I think the other thing that we have to recognize, too, is as we go forward, we are, I think, trying to ensure that we do not replicate the crisis of 2008, that we do not have a financial collapse. Much of that was predicated and based upon the predatory behavior of institutions. One of the great aspects, I think, in terms of the Dodd-Frank Act is the first time we tried to shine some light on the shadow banking system. FDIC regulates financial institutions. OCC regulates national banks. The Federal Reserve regulates. But for the first time, we decided to say, let's take a across-the-board position with respect to the shadow financial system. So I have to say something. This notion of let's wait till we get it perfect before we appoint somebody would have delayed, I think, the election of George Washington for many decades. So, Mr. Cordray, let me just ask once, I have very little time, one specific question. You already have authority transferred to you from 7 agencies that's in this organization that's being implemented today. Is that correct? Go ahead, you can. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I want to be sensitive to my colleagues. So this opening statement, okay, I wanted to do both. Forgive me. I'm a man with a mission. Let me quickly conclude in 20 seconds. I think we've got to move forward. We essentially know what this is about. The chairman has pointed out. This is not, we're waiting for, I think, the sensible proposals to make a reform, but it's hard to do that until you see the agency operate in the field, on the ground. And I hope very quickly we can confirm you, Mr. Cordray, so we can do that.
Senator Crooker. Senator Reed.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your willingness to serve in a very difficult time in a very challenging office. You also served as the state treasurer in Ohio. That's correct?
I did, yes.
And so you come to this job with multiple skills. One is an attorney general who had to go out and protect people, but two is essentially the chief financial manager for the state of Ohio. And so suffice to say, and you can elaborate, you are certainly, I think, aware of, and not only aware of, but sensitive to some of the legitimate concerns of the banking industry about the predictability, about the soundness of financial institutions, about the needs that they have. Is that fair to say?
I think I am, Senator. As you mentioned, I was both a state and a county treasurer. It was a AAA rated county, which is an unusual thing in American local government finances. But most notably, perhaps, is my tenure as treasurer at the state was the time leading up to the financial crisis. It was 2007, 2008. It was one of the most difficult times to try to manage and safeguard public funds that I think we've seen in my lifetime. We were very careful and conservative about how we invested the public's money, how we safeguarded that money. We suffered no losses when I was the state treasurer in any of our funds, including our state local government fund, which was not true of a number of states around the country. I'm very proud of that. But I also think that work gave me a very close working relationship with banks in Ohio because they partnered with us on a lot of the work we did to manage the state's finances, both as custodians of pension funds, in terms of debt management and debt issuance, and the like, both large and small banks. So it gave me a good working sense of their operations, of their concerns. I created a banking advisory council when I was state treasurer and carried forward the same approach as attorney general. So we would meet regularly. I would hear their concerns, and they would talk to me about whatever issues were on their mind. I think that's the accessibility I've tried to foster, and I would bring that to the Bureau. But I do have that background, and I think it's part of what maybe would be kept in mind in assessing my qualifications.
One office within your proposed purview is the Servicemen's Affairs, led now by Holly Petraeus. And can you comment upon your view for its importance? Many of us here think it is critical because these are employees of the federal government, and they are usually far from their home, and their ability to connect with a local attorney general or a state's attorney is limited. And, you know, this goes back about 35 plus years. I can recall how they were victims of many consumer frauds, and now I'm hearing because of the internet it's even worse and even more difficult for local authorities to deal with it, but now we have a federal office, so you might comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I had some awareness of these issues. When I was Ohio Attorney General, we had a pro bono group that provided legal advice to soldiers, service members who were being deployed, often on short notice, and to their families. But I will say that since coming to the Bureau, I have learned a lot, and I expect to continue to learn a lot. And part of what I've learned has been from Mrs. Petraeus, who, as you say, is an outstanding colleague of mine and heads our Office of Service Member Affairs. She's taught us all, I think, about the special needs of service members, how deployments and even forced transfers within this country create hardships for their families. She herself talks about she and her husband have moved, I think she said, 23 times in 36 years over the course of his long and distinguished career. But also the fact that they're now finding that if you have consumer finance issues as a citizen, they're bad enough, they're tough enough, you might face bankruptcy or foreclosure. As a service member, you can lose your security clearance. You may not be able to continue to do the job you're trained for. That's not good for the service member, it's not good for the military, it's not good for the country. So these are very serious issues. And she continues to bring them to our attention. Recently, she and I met with the JAG Corps of all branches of the service to begin to coordinate on enforcing the law to protect service members and the special needs around military bases, which are a magnet for a lot of financial predators. And so this is something we're excited about. It's something we hope to be able to deliver for those service members, that someone will stand on their side. And I hope that that will be one of the marked successes of the new Bureau.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.